This week on the Esther Krakue Show.
Why risk your heart when you can be replaced with one swipe? Modern dating is started to feel like a hostage negotiation, where both sides assume the other is lying. A lot of men now believe that women don't truly want partnership. And a lot of women, meanwhile, believe that men don't truly want intimacy. And men struggle to trust real women because real women don't behave like porn. They still want intimacy and loyalty. But what is eroded is the confidence that sincerity exists. But before we talk about solutions, we need to be clear about what changed. Men and women don't actually hate each other, at least not in the way the internet pretends we do. What is broken, more than anything else, is trust. Modern dating is no longer romantic in any meaningful sense. It started to feel like a hostage negotiation, where both sides assume the other is lying, withholding something, or quietly preparing an exit. A lot of men now believe that women don't truly want partnership, and that what they really want is the lifestyle that comes with it. The validation, the attention, the security, and the option to walk away the moment something better appears. And a lot of women, meanwhile, believe that men don't truly want intimacy, and that what they really want is access to their bodies, novelty, convenience, and freedom from responsibility. Underneath all of this is the same exhausted, paranoid question. Why risk your heart when you can be replaced with one swipe? This is not just personal disappointment playing out millions of times over. It's structural, and it reflects a culture-wide breakdown in how men and women relate to each other. We dismantled an old relationship contract for better and for worse, and we never wrote a new one. So this isn't going to be another video about communicating better or downloading a different dating app. This is about what men and women can actually do, in practice, to rebuild trust with each other in the real world. Because if this doesn't change, none of us gets the relationships we quietly still want. But before we talk about solutions, we need to be clear about what changed. Trust didn't collapse because people suddenly became worse. Trust collapsed because the structure of dating changed, the incentives changed, and the environments we meet each other in changed. And those shifts trained both sexes to protect themselves first and assume the worst. To make sense of where we are now, it helps to walk through the main forces that turn dating into something brittle and suspicious, because once you see the mechanics, you can start to reverse them. The first shift is that hookup culture made relationships feel disposable. Hookup culture didn't stabilize relationships because men and women became morally inferior overnight. It destabilized relationships because the whole model shifted. We moved from something closer to court then commit to something more like sample then maybe commit. And that seemingly small change altered how people behave at a deep level. The age of first marriage has risen sharply in both the US and the UK, and pair bonding has been delayed or avoided entirely, replaced by serial short-term arrangements that look more like temporary placements than foundations for a shared life. When you date someone while assuming the connection is temporary, you protect yourself in ways that feel sensible in the moment and corrosive in the long term. You hold back emotionally. You avoid vulnerability. You hedge your bets. You try to extract what you can because you assume the other person is doing exactly the same thing. Investment only makes sense when something is meant to last, and modern dating has trained people to treat lasting as naive. Even cohabitation has changed in character. Sociologists describe a pattern of sliding rather than deciding, where couples drift into living together without making a conscious commitment. They accumulate furniture and routines without ever agreeing on where the relationship is going, which means the bond grows in convenience but not in clarity. The result is predictable. The way we date now trains people to fear commitment and then quietly punishes them for not committing. Trust collapses because low-stakes connection becomes the norm, and you can't build a serious we on foundations that were designed to be disposable. The second shift is that the algorithm trained us to distrust reality itself. Technology then poured fuel on the fire. If you want to understand why men and women increasingly distrust one another, you should look at the screen in your hand. Social media didn't just change communication, it turned courtship into marketing. Everyone is performing now, even the people who swear they aren't. Everyone is positioning themselves, polishing their image, and living inside a rolling audition, and constant upward comparison has been consistently linked in research to worse mental health outcomes, including higher anxiety, lower self-esteem, and dissatisfaction with real relationships. This matters because the dominant interface between the sexes is now the algorithm, and algorithms disproportionately show you the most extreme examples of beauty, lifestyle, and status. They don't show you the attainable or the ordinary. They show you the top sliver of everything, over and over again, until your sense of normal gets warped. Once that happens, real people begin to feel like compromises. If you believe something better is always one swipe away, you invest less in the person sitting across from you because your attention is split between the date and the imaginary alternatives in your pocket. Pornography amplifies this problem, particularly for men. Large-scale studies have found associations between higher porn consumption and lower relationship satisfaction, as well as altered expectations around sex and intimacy. Over time, the brain can become conditioned to novelty and control rather than patience and emotional risk, and that conditioning spills into real relationships in ways people often don't want to admit. So we end up in this absurd position where men struggle to trust real women because real women don't behave like porn, and women struggle to trust real men because real men don't behave like curated Instagram husbands. The algorithm lies, and trust cannot survive when fantasy becomes the reference point and reality becomes the disappointment. The third shift is that ideology quietly dissolved the old relationship contract without replacing it with anything stable. For decades, women were told that freedom meant not needing men, and men were told that masculinity was suspect and that commitment was a trap. The old contract had plenty of flaws, but it was legible. People broadly understood what was expected, what was valued, and what the roles were meant to mean, even when those roles were contested or imperfect. We dismantled that clarity and replaced it with ambiguity, and ambiguity is an enemy of trust because it makes people feel unsafe. Loneliness is now recognized as a serious public health problem in both the US and the UK, and loneliness doesn't just hurt, it warps perception. When people feel disconnected, they become hypervigilant, they reread messages, they look for hidden meanings, they assume bad faith because suspicion feels like protection when you don't feel anchored. So we produce women who are afraid to trust men because independence feels fragile, and men who are afraid to trust women because the deal feels opaque and rigged. Marriage lost symbolic weight and suspicion filled the gap, and suspicion is the opposite of pair bonding. The fourth shift is that economics made commitment feel riskier. Economics added another layer of instability because trust is not only emotional, it's practical. Large numbers of working-age men have fallen out of stable employment in both the US and the UK, while women have reached higher levels of education and financial independence than any generation before them. That combination changes the dating market because women become more selective in a world where they can afford to be, and men find it harder to signal capability in ways that translate into long-term security. Research on associative mating suggests that high achievers increasingly pair off with other high achievers, while everyone else feels excluded from stable pathways into family life, and that exclusion hardens into resentment and mistrust. At the same time, marriage itself tends to stabilize men economically and behaviorally, which creates a vicious loop. Trust is needed to commit, but commitment is often what creates a stability that makes trust feel rational. The fifth shift is that we lost third-party vetting and replaced it with swipe-based chaos. For most of human history, partners were filtered through families, communities, workplaces, religious institutions, and shared reputations. Today, that system has largely been replaced by private selection through apps, which means there's no shared context, no reputation system, and no accountability. Meanwhile, long-term community structures have declined. Churches, clubs, extended families, neighborhood ties, and local institutions are weaker than they used to be, and people now choose partners in isolation. Trust can't easily grow in isolation. When you remove vetting, dating becomes more transactional, rejection becomes global, and individuals start to behave like brands. Branding is efficient, but it's hostile to intimacy. So how do we build trust in practice? At this point, it's tempting to conclude that everything is broken and that nothing can be fixed. The truth is less dramatic and more helpful. Trust can be rebuilt, but it has to be rebuilt deliberately through behavior, incentives, and environments that reward sincerity again. That starts with women and men taking responsibility for different parts of the problem without turning it into a blame game. This is what women can do. For women, rebuilding trust often starts with rejecting the idea that independence means emotional self-sufficiency. Trust requires interdependence, and it always has, because intimacy is not a solo project. Endless optionality doesn't make people safer. It often makes them more anxious because hoarding options produces doubt rather than security, and it teaches your nervous system to stay half out the door even when you like someone. It also helps to be deliberate about your digital environment. When you compare ordinary men to the top fraction of online performers, you can erode your own satisfaction before a relationship even begins, because you start evaluating real people against a fantasy feed that was designed to make you feel slightly dissatisfied. Trust grows through shared effort, and that effort is usually mundane. It grows through planning, solving problems, building routines, and doing ordinary life together in a way that creates a sense of partnership rather than performance. Clarity matters as well. Many men relax when intentions are stated plainly because ambiguity feels like a threat when you already suspect you're being kept as an option. If you want commitment, it helps to say so with calm confidence rather than hinting, testing, or playing games with emotional distance. Using the possibility of leaving as a negotiation tactic can slowly poison the foundation of any bond. Commitment cannot grow in soil that is constantly being shaken. And finally, choosing trajectory over flash matters more than people admit. A man who is building steadily is often a better long-term bet than someone who looks impressive for 5 minutes but has no stable direction behind the image. Now here's what men can do. For men, trust begins with growing up in substance rather than style. Responsibility is not dangerous. Responsibility matures people, and reliability creates safety in ways that charisma never can. Keeping small promises builds credibility long before grand declarations do, and women often trust what you consistently do far more than what you passionately say. Competence matters more than performance. Being able to organize your life, manage money, look after your health, and contribute practically creates a quiet confidence that's difficult to fake and deeply stabilizing to be around. It also means cleaning up your inputs. If your brain is constantly trained on algorithmic novelty, whether that's through porn or thirst traps or endless scrolling, dissatisfaction becomes your baseline, and you start carrying that restlessness into real relationships. You cannot train yourself on constant variety and then act shocked when one person doesn't feel like enough. Future faking destroys trust faster than almost anything else. Promising emotional commitment that you don't back with behavior teaches women to assume deception, even when you're sincere later, because you've trained them not to believe you. Leadership in a relationship doesn't mean dominance. It means clarity. It means being able to say what you want, what you offer, and where you're going, and then behaving in a way that matches your words. Safety is demonstrated through consistency, not speeches, and men rebuild trust when maturity becomes a daily habit rather than a performance. The truth is this: men and women are not furious with each other, they're tired. People still want connection, they still want intimacy and loyalty. But what is eroded is the confidence that sincerity exists and the sense that taking a risk will be met with care rather than exploitation. Trust returns when trust becomes rational again. That means women choosing with standards rather than ego, and men leading with substance rather than theatre. It means adults building adult relationships even when the culture around them rewards cynicism, detachment, and constant escape routes. In the end, this is a choice we make repeatedly. It's a choice to prioritize responsibility over spectacle and real people over algorithmic fantasy, because that is the only way anything stable is built.